Welcome everybody to the second weekend of the 2021 Spring Writes Literary Festival. We have many more events this weekend for you to check out. We've got events Friday night, Saturday night, and Sunday night, and we have writing workshops continuing through November. Spring Writes is a program of the Community Arts Partnership of Tompkins County, also known as CAP, and I am Robin Schwartz, CAP's Program and Grant Director. Megan Barber, CAP Executive Director, is also on the call, and now you've met the entire staff. All Spring Writes events from May 5th to the 16th are being taped, and the videos will be up at springwrites.org in a week or so. And once the videos are on the site, I'll actually email all of you to let you know that they're there. Like right now, there's a trampoline storytelling event, but you don't have to miss it because we'll be taping both of these. Some housekeeping. Throughout this event, we ask the audience to please stay on mute. So for all the people that I was just chatting with, if you could put yourselves back on mute. And the reason for that is just that we don't hear any background noise. Like for instance, my cat is crying really loudly right now. I don't think you hear her, but she'll come in at some point, although we all think that's adorable. So that's probably okay. Please use the chat feature heavily because we're on mute. And because some of us will turn off our video, it's really the chat where we engage with each other. And comments, kudos, questions, anything you want to put in there is just wonderful seeing all that engagement. I'd like to thank our wonderful Spring Writes sponsors, Ithaca College, Wegmans, M&T Bank, CFCU Community Credit Union, the Odyssey Bookstore, and the Ithaca Marriott. We also receive support from New York State Council on the Arts, and Poets and Writers helps us pay our participating writers. Although this festival is free, actually all of our programs are free, we always ask for donations at our events. So if you feel moved to donate any amount to the amazing, wonderful Community Arts Partnership or the Spring Writes Literary Festival, I will put I'll put a link in the chat along with our CAP website and the Spring Writes schedule link. So we begin. First, I am going to turn the mic. Oh, first I have to tell you about the Poet Laureate program. So welcome to past and present Tompkins County Poet Laureates. The position of the Tompkins County Poet Laureate was established by the Tompkins County Legislature. It was Stu Stein's idea in 2001 to honor local outstanding poets, integrate poetry into our communities, enrich the education of our young people, and enhance the county's position as a cultural center, which we are. The selection and announcement of the Poet Laureate is administered by us, by the Community Arts Partnership. We solicit nominations. Actually, Megan solicits nominations and organizes the selection panel. Appointments are for 2-year terms. This is an honorary position without salary. Tonight, we are joined by Katharyn Howd Machan, Michelle Courtney Berry, Paul Hamill from South Carolina, Jay Leeming, Gail Holst-Warhaft, Jack Hopper, Melissa Tuckey, and Christine Kitano. There are 2 other past Poet Laureates, Ziza Hava and Tish Perlman. Neither could join us tonight, but we say hi to them. And we're going to start with me introducing Katharyn Mahan. So I'm going to find Katharyn. There she is. I'm going to spotlight her and keep talking. Katharyn served from 2002 to 2004, our first Poet Laureate. Since 1977, Katharyn has taught creative writing at Ithaca College. Her specialty courses are writing science fiction and fantasy, women in fairy tales, and fairy tales, the hero's journey. Her most recently published collections of poems are A Slow Bottle of Wine, the Comstock Writers 2020, and What the Piper Promised, AQP Press 2018, both winners in national competitions. So Katharyn, I turn the mic over to you.
Thank you so much, Robin. I am so happy this event is happening. I hope it becomes an annual one because really Spring Writes, Poets Laureate, they kind of go together.
Yeah.
Thank you, Robin. I have 5 poems to share this evening. The first is one that was just published in a tribute anthology of Lips magazine, because my first mentor outside of academia was the poet Lynn Liftion, and she died over a year ago. And so the call went out. So this is my poem in honor of Lynn Liftion. I took a workshop with her at the College of St. Rose in 1975, and my life changed as a result. 1975. Out of Iowa, where brows rose high, to see a woman who dared to write, out of cornfields, flat miles of soy, sunsets spreading edge to edge, as though to silence unsure tongues. Out of walls where words from men were sacrosanct, secure, sublime, I traveled home again and found a gaze that welcomed my life's poems, a voice that said, but yes, of course, women must write what we know, into body, into loving, into what good anger brings for art that resonates through time. Robin mentioned my course in Women in Fairy Tales for the honors program at Ithaca College. And anyone who is a feminist and a feminist who understands the power of fairy tales, Heart's course right there. And last year we had, of course, to disappear from each other into the land of Zoom. But before that, vividly, I remember being with the women in the class. And this poem arose from an exercise that we did together, where we talked of witches gathered quietly in morning light, listening to our clear questions about the magic they had cast and kept from being silenced. Splendid ghosts, sacred ghosts, they hovered over our lips and pens as we voiced and then set to page guesses, memories, wisdoms, prayers, inspired by a black cat reading a solemn book of spells. How can a room of women create such power it changes a world? We looked to them, their confidence in hearts healing history's wrong. Quietly, they sang to us, their circle, our circle of widening words. Survival, the call for soul's embrace, firm mouths proclaiming strong. Since 1985, a major project, a through line of all my time of writing. Never know when they're going to arise, but this one did relatively recently. My town of Red Wing in fictional Western 1988. I have a new collection. One was called Secret Music that came out from Cayuga Lake Books. And the one that's still growing, I've got it out, in that great big circle around the world. Is anybody going to be wanting to publish it? We shall see. Called Where Crimson's Called For. Crimson, Where It's Called For. And this is the title poem, the last poem in the collection. Kind of again, talking about witches, that figure of the silent among us who often are the ones who draw together the power and spin it outward again. Amira Gray Young, Red Wing, 1888. Alone at night, 4 candles lit, I spin. No one must know my source of silk, where all my neighbors' fears and prayers combine. It's in this place, with wide framed mirrors on each wall, I generate the dreams this tight town needs. They're red where crimson's called for, blue where sky wants rising wings, smooth black for broken seeds that yield a lifetime's how. and why? What do I know? My fingers sing the wheel, hearts turn for me, in words they dare not say. Small room, high window, all the breaths I feel. They come together at the close of day. I'm shadow, silver, and when I am dead, another will embrace these spools for thread. And again, fantasy, science fiction, a big core of what I teach, becomes part of what I write. And this is, I guess we'd say, let's hope it's looking to a future that does not happen. Let's hope. Let's hope. However, interview after the pandemic. How many masks did you stitch with strong thread? One first, then two, three, more, then some for all my neighbors. How often did you stop and rinse your hands? I sang The Farmer in the Dell 2,000 times. Did your washing machine break down? My skirts are paler. My pants wore thin. And shoes, they made the dryer tremble. When did you last embrace a friend? I learned to touch by pressing keys. People shrank to squares of Zoom. Where did you go to find God's beauty? Empty walkways, a lake's lone edge, always dreading others' steps. What will you do with your masks now? Shred them, burn them. What will you do with your masks now? Sew them into a heritage quilt to be cut apart when a new virus spreads its deadly breath. And finally, kind of an odd little series started while teaching the Ithaca Young Writers in the Ithaca Young Writers Institute. We're working with fantasy with high school students. Unicorn poems, but they're not actually unicorns. They're portraits of many. Okay. River unicorn. Likes to walk along green banks 2 days after a thunderstorm's hit. So there's no fierce gush, no rushing mud, but the water's deep enough for her to cool her careful hooves if she wants to make her way down to the shore. Growing up, she revered Connecticut. Summers of strawberries, wild daisies, wide sky, with her old father teaching her how to guide tomatoes up twisted sticks and gather bell peppers when they are ripe. Taking it slow is the mantra she learned. And now that she's getting old herself, River Unicorn moves where she will, legs less limber, withers worn, her soft little beard a soothing sign. She'll be wise enough to flow with time when her blue hour comes. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Katharyn. I'm looking ahead to Michelle. Next, I want to introduce Michelle Courtney Berry. And Michelle, MPS, Cornell University. Michelle, is that Master of Political Science, MPS?
I think it's professional studies. It's been a while. Call it anything you want.
It could be anything. Master of Poetry.
Yeah.
Sensations, is a performer, actor, humorist, and author of The Month of Not Speaking and Breathe. She writes fiction, nonfiction, articles, and plays. Her poetry has been published by Horticulture Magazine, Northwestern University Press, Random House, Nocturnes, A Review of the Literary Arts, Patterson Literary Review, Oxford Magazine, and Ithaca Lit. And Michelle was the Poet Laureate from 2004 through 2006. Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you, Robin. Thanks, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here and to connect with poetry again. I feel like I lost touch with poetry and I've been reading more and writing more. So I wanted to read from my collection about my grandmother. This piece is called Cane. It was published in Oxford American Magazine. Grandma Annie always brought the cane down with one swift lash, a cutting stroke so perfect even white folks had to go on and praise her. She worked the fields from the first hint of daylight, her long body stronger than the plow animals in front of her, the blue flowered dress hitched up beyond what was considered appropriate. Shoot, she'd say, it's too hot to be formal. Sometimes she'd turn her dark brown face up to the sweltering sky, talking to God, her mouth full of praises but scant of wishes, dreams. And when she was done praying, my Grandpa James would slide up alongside her, pat her on the backside a few times here and there, and as the day drew down, say real sly in her ear, strong like an ox, I reckon. She'd snort and brush past him, her pace quickening, her mind anticipating that favorite time of day, dusk, when a slight breeze would come over you and your eyes would strain to remember the last row you was on. Then all at once, night, a time rich with blessings, like having your own thoughts to think on, the collards, meat, and fat back on the stove, the thick crust of cornbread dabbed greasy with butter, the oil lamp burnishing the room, the empty pie plates in the sink, the girls splashing, the sounds of tin and water, the tumbling into bed, their sure breathing, and the rocking chair creaking. Grandma Annie adjusts the sewing in her lap, the needle in one hand, the stitching so straight and certain you'd swear a machine had gone and done it. Sometimes Grandpa James would sit beside her in his drawers, shirtless. She'd look up from her sewing and smile, just a little bit, and he'd take a sip of whiskey. He'd glance at the golden skin, the wavy hair under. She'd glance at his golden skin, the wavy hair under his arms, the promise of what was between his legs. Maybe it was the cane's stiffness, its toughness, even in the breaking, that she admired. It sure wasn't the cotton, its intolerable whiteness, the insufferable bowls. But tonight, she wasn't in the mood to remember things that pained her. Tonight, she was in the mood for her husband, who put his drink down, leaned over and uncoiled the heavy braids from her head and pulled her up. She spits a little snuff into the sink, takes a sip of honey water, and heads to bed. Later, with her pulse in her throat, naked, she licks the sweat from his palm. It tastes like sugar on her tongue. After Grandpa died, what Annie wanted. Quiet, no flies their delirious buzz, no cast iron sizzling lard, no church ladies with swishing skirts and clasped hands, no pies oozing fruit jam, no chairs scraping the floor, no people rising to leave, no touching her shoulder and murmuring as they closed the door, just quiet. Finally, she got what she wanted. Time alone with a body, cleaned and dressed, normal looking almost, except for the bullet hole that went clean through his head. She covered it with his favorite cap. She rested now beside him, dreaming him awake, her eyes cracked with tears, his good right hand close to hers, the covers pulled up tight against her ears. And this last piece is a poem I wrote at Bread Loaf. I guess it used to be called Bed Loaf before they started making, this is the rumor, I don't know anything about it, but they started making a rule that they wanted more people who were partnered up to come, so it didn't just turn into a wild bunch of writers dating each other, dating in quotes. I I'm a brainiac. So if I go to a writings retreat, I'm just up writing all night. So my roommates were like, what were you doing? And I'm like, I was up all night dealing with this ghost called Miranda, and I wrote this poem. And they're like, are you sure you weren't out dating? I'm like, no, I'm writing this poem. So this is called Miranda Remembers Cuba, 1974. 1. Right before my mother burned the house down, she tended the roses. Each day that summer, she came wearing the pale yellow dress, floppy hat, and holding the bright red toolbox. If I was in the yard, she'd yell, Miranda, me voy para la pega, which was a big joke between us because she was just pretending to leave for an office in Havana. We were the work, the house, the loud children, the inscrutable father. The pleasure was in the roses. In the year, Castro said, after 15 years of revolution, women's rights are in an arena in which we are still behind. My mother's flowers bloomed. Everywhere the pink Monticello shrubs shed their frosty skins. In the garden, zinc-colored JFK tea roses chortled. On the patio, geranium red floribunda spat through cracks. Running the trellis of the house, the scarlet altissimo climbed. In the garden, my mother would push the trowel deep into the ground around the bushes. Elbow-high gloves, gargantuan on the slender arms, head tilted like a sunflower, legs spread, and the sharp sucking of teeth, the hiss when she forgot the danger of roses. 2, on the last day of the killings, the fields burned. All around, the terror of chickens, some headless and running, others on the metal tables, where the hardest part of all, much harder than the chopping of heads, which was really quite routine, was the pulling of wing feathers and hairs from the anus. The easiest part? Chopping the oil gland out, halving the chicken, and clunking the heart and lungs into the silver bowl. 3, on the morning it happened, the day up on hind legs, the sun hot as a whip, clouds rolling in, paella burning the stove. All the roses were cut down, hundreds and hundreds of fiery flaming heads jutting the red wheelbarrows, and my mother standing in front of the house, her hands turning clothespins over and over, her face blank, the sky pulled back, everything black.
Thank you. Thank you so much. That was I really enjoy listening to your voice.
Thank you.
Next is, let's highlight me, add spotlight, and we're going to hear from Paul Hamill. And here's Paul. And I'm asking you to unmute and I will introduce you. Paul Hamill, who was Tompkins County's 3rd Poet Laureate, has published 4 collections of poetry in many journals, such as the Georgia Review. We just found this out, but he was the founding board chairperson of our organization, the Community Arts Partnership. That was in 1991, and the first board chair of our local Ithaca City of Asylum before retiring from Ithaca College and moving to Charleston, South Carolina. In 2019, he published a prose study and Crown Thy Good with Brotherhood on the imagination of fraternity. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you very much. I'm so delighted to be here. And my first poem is called Cicadas, and it's a short poem, but I'm so delighted to see so many people that are friends and comrades. And it is, of course, the 17-year cycle for the cicadas, about something that happens to teachers often. You meet a student or that you think is quite a remarkable person, and you know that that person will go off into their own life and you probably will never see them again. Their meetings had been brief, and though he liked her, he knew he'd never glimpse her deeper life. But then she wrote so warmly of nights with friends by cornfields, with a generous hazy moon, a radio, and heat lightning. She'd let him glimpse the center of her peace, fragile yet sure in its darkness, close to the chirping earth. Stranger friendships struck like a match in a cave. I have read that sometimes in bomb shelters, Amid the sweaty air and sullen inner weather, one stranger opens to another a phrase or gesture, little more, but then all clear scatters them like a bloodless direct hit. If only we were cicadas, reappearing to flare again for each other in distant cycles, telling the heart's path from that first connection. I like to write poems sometimes about how people talk and what they talk about. This is a poem dedicated to my wife, Kristen, who is off to the side here and is a good friend of several of you, especially Katherine. And it's called Pillow Talk. Pillow Talk, almost impossible to write about the intimate pleasure of it because it is fragmentary, secret, though rarely portentous, contains repeated themes like a pastoral symphony that randomly by midnight inspiration and usually is only half recalled like other gestures of established love. It is so often matter of fact. I forgot to pick up the coffee. Did you find that shirt? Sally looked good tonight. That one who has not shared a lover's pillow might think it negligible and not, as it is, the small stream always meandering and refreshing down the deep channels carved in the season of torrents. Hard to get at the delicate, intimate importance. It is a little like when bread is baking, perhaps Chris's, with the scents of cinnamon and cloves in pumpkin, about which I am particularly sentimental. Elementary solids, brick or dome or wheel, but with Arabian auras, lemon, almond, honey, warming the whole house, so that even when I walk out or simply recall in the course of the day, I am enveloped. The soft word at the pillow before sleep, the listening touch, confidences, chuckling or weeping, the bread of friendship in the mansion of romance. And those who eat of the bread, in old tales of expert lovers, settings are calm, perhaps a tent of ornate rugs and cushions, music outside, scents in the air, and quiet talk of things that please both. The passion is not lessened, but heightened, woven into the complex silks, elevated by measure as by verse, prolonged in anticipation by pleasure of the other's voice. And later, after the sweet storm, the talk is again of almost nothing, the loosened hair in disarray on the shared pillow. In a very different thing, a different level, this is a poem about talking about grief. It's called A Grace in Grief, and it starts with a little scrap from Aristotle, who says that justice is the bond that unites men in states. We should probably put this on some of our public buildings. Justice is what unites humans in states. A grace in grief. All mourn, some learn to mourn and celebrate. Some suffer purely, hardly recovering, and some only resent for their pain, punishing whom they can. It seems to go by temperament, private depths of wisdom, how well the bereaved assent to that human mode in which A song of grief is a duet about gifts received and a great loss, each part kept vivid by the other. My friend who lost a child joins hands around the table for grace the more sincerely. A pause before pleasure is always a gesture. His, shaped by his habit of thanking, praise rising from the shadow. In the hours before Mother Wolf departs from the still cub, her hesitance speaks heartbreak. Mute and simple, she leaves, then circles back, and still unanswered must follow her next hunger. But when a human loss is told so that when what was given and taken receive as much of their due as speech can yield, it is as if a wise judge convened sorrow and joy to hear the claims of each, then reaffirmed as law for both the unbroken bond of souls. And finally, another one from our days in a big old farmhouse in Lansing. One year, when it was sunny, on one October weekend, we realized our happiness. The children brought foxy grapes from the back fence tangle and screamed with laughter at turns in the tub, stomping for wine. We lovers had quiet words as we sat on the porch after work on the place, observing as if the world were a flowering wall, the same satisfaction as naming then lying back in Eden, approving how things fit their names. Lion and sparrow, hollyhock and hay, orders fixed for imagining, essences blooming in our eyes. Thank you, everybody. So good to see you. She's muted.
I am muted. I think I was telling people that by the time I finish 40 events, I'll probably have the hang of Zoom. These are all practice. So next we have Jay Leeming. And Jay, hi Jay. Jay is a performance storyteller and poet whose work has captivated audiences in theater schools, libraries, and national parks. He's the creator of the Crane Bag podcast, the author of 2 books of poetry, and the recipient of a fellowship from the National Endowment for the Arts. Recordings and more information about his work can be found at jleeming.com. Thank you, Jay.
Thank you. Thank you, Robin. Thank you, Megan. Thank you, Cap, for making this happen. It's wonderful to see everybody. My poetry has jumped across the river into the trees and become a different kind of animal. So I bring you that animal tonight. How's the sound? Can we hear? We can hear the guitar. There is a guitar here, just so you know. All right. This is a story about 3,000 years old that happened across the street from wherever you live, wherever that is. Once the god Zeus fell in love. Yes, the god Zeus fell in love. And maybe the gods fall in love more deeply than we can ever know. And the woman he fell in love with was a goddess, of course. And her name was Metis. And she had a secret power, which was to change her shape into anything she wanted to be. She could transform herself and her name was Metis, and she taught this art to Zeus himself. She taught him how to transform his body and his shape. So they would get together, the two of them, as people get together who are in love. They would get together at Olympus, but they would go off to spend time together, and they would be perhaps stallion and mare. Perhaps they would be two wolves running across a blizzard-soaked field. Perhaps they would be two snakes writhing together, intimately loving the taste of skin. Perhaps they would be two eagles flying off across a field. So they would enjoy the delights of love, the whispery, furry, feathery, fishy delights of love, and they would return to Olympus as god and goddess. But Zeus, well, he had a wandering eye. And one day, walking near Olympus in a field, there was a well there, and he saw another goddess named Hera. And she was lifting up a bucket from that well, a bucket of cold water. And he saw the fire in her eyes, and he saw the coldness of the water. He sensed that, and he loved her shape, and he loved how she held these two extremes in her being there, the fire and the water. And everything was equal and beautiful there, so he smiled at her. But she snarled at him. She scowled, and she walked away. Well, Zeus got together with Metis the next day. But now when this happened, well, she became a horse, and he became a turtle. And then she became an ostrich, and he became a crab. And she became a dog, and he became a snake. And then she became a fly, and he became a frog. And his sticky tongue lashed out, thunk, and grabbed hold of her, and snapped her up into his belly, and she seemed to be gone. And then Zeus transformed himself into a sparrow, using the magic Metis had taught him. And he flew away from that place back to Olympus. But on the way there was a rainstorm. We know, we live here, we know what rain is. Rain came thundering down from the sky. He was caught as a sparrow in that rain. So he went to a garden there, one of the gardens of Olympus, and took shelter beneath an apple tree. And there was a goddess there, and her name was Hera. She was sheltering also beneath this tree. And she saw the poor bedraggled sparrow. "Oh, you poor sparrow," she said. And she reached out and lifted up the sparrow and held it close to her breasts. And a moment later, that sparrow became a cat, and then became a dog, and then became a lion, and then became Zeus himself. And now no longer was she holding this being, but she was being held, and she cried out, but he smothered her cry with a kiss. And then she cried out again, but he pinned her to that tree and kissed her again. And she cried out, and after that, it was hard to say whether her cries were of pain or of delight. The next day, after that rainstorm finished, Hera and Zeus were crowned as king and queen of the universe. We need a king and queen of the universe, so they were crowned as king and queen of the universe in a beautiful ceremony. And so everything seemed to be good, and perhaps this story's over. But the thing is, Zeus heard a sound after a while, and the sound was like this. Tap, 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 tap. Tap, 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 tap. You hear that? And he said to Hermes. No, nobody'd heard. Tap, 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 tap. It seemed to be coming from inside his head. So after a while, it got pretty bad. He had to get a headache. Oh, boy, tap, 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 wham, wham, wham. What had happened is this. Metis, the goddess of cleverness and transformation, she was in fact still inside Zeus, but up in his head. And she was pregnant, yes, and she was preparing for the birth of her daughter by making a golden breastplate for her daughter. Tap, 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 wham, 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 wham. So this went on all day and all night, and Zeus began reeling around. Oh, my head! Down on earth, things were strange. There were blizzards in the rainforest. There were tornadoes at the North Pole. Cows were blown out of fields. The weather was crazy up there. He's reeling around. Oh, inside his head, she's tapping it out. Tap, 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 tap. And finally, one day, the breastplate was finished. Ah, a breastplate for my daughter. That's lovely. The storms on earth went away. Zeus's headache went away. He felt fine. Ah, at last. And then Metis had another idea. You know, my daughter, she's got a breastplate, but I think she needs a golden helmet. Yes. So she began tapping it out. Wham, 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 wham. Oh, the headaches came back. Zeus reels around. The storms on earth. There's red lightning in Newfield. There's tornadoes in the commons. It's chaos. Holy cow. And then suddenly Hermes is there and he says, we've got to get Hephaestus, the blacksmith. Get him up here. So Hephaestus, this big burly guy who works in a volcano down there, comes up from his workshop to Olympus. Hermes is there. Zeus is going, oh gosh, and he says, open his head. Hephaestus says, what? Open his head. So Hephaestus takes his hammer, gives 3, winds up. 1, 2, 3, and then wham! He hits Zeus right in the head. Bam! And his head opens his skull, and out of it comes Athena herself. And she says, aha! I am Athena, goddess of wisdom and power. I offer you the world. And she takes her sword and she crashes it 3 times on her breastplate so that all the thrones of Olympus ring with that sound. And she comes to the ground elegantly, sweetly, beautifully. And she walks to the throne that is empty, and she sits down in that throne. And everyone looks at her, and they can see, yes, she was always meant to sit here with us. And Zeus's head knit itself up again, for he was a god after all. And everything went on as before. But the thing is, every now and then, when the gods were in council, Zeus would say something that was a little funny, a little unexpected. A whispery, buzzing thought would come out of his mouth, and they would look at him and say, I wonder, and do you think? But then he would glare at them, and they would say nothing, because he was, after all, the king of the gods.
Forgetting everyone's name. Thank you, Jay. Storyteller, poet, musician, all rolled into one. Thank you. The next is Gail Holst-Warhaft, and you can tell me whether I have actually pronounced your name correctly when you're on. Gail has published 2 books on grief and lament, many translations of Greek literature, and 2 collections of her own poetry, Penelope's Confession and Lucky Country. Her most recent books are The Fall of Athens and The House with the Scorpions. She was Poet Laureate of Tompkins County from 2011 and 2012. 2 more books on Greek music are forthcoming.
Thank you, everybody, and it's lovely to see you all. And Jay, that's a hard act to follow, I'm afraid. It's just a reading you're getting from me. I didn't get out my harpsichord or do anything. I have no props, but I would like to say that these poems are mostly about walking and being in the forests around Ithaca during this very hard year. The forest has been particularly comforting and beautiful. This one's called Below It All. I should also explain that I'm married to a scientist. As we struggle against a strenuous wind which nearly knocks us off our feet, I wonder why the ant on the forest floor isn't blown away. The ant, you tell me, walks undisturbed in a layer a millimeter or 2. I'm sorry, I'm having a little issue with my computer here. A millimeter or 2 above Earth's surface, where the flow is laminar, like olive oil spilled on a plate, but where we walk, the air swirls in vortices, picking up leaves, stinging our faces. Above us, winds get stronger, tossing bundles of cloud about like thistledown. The ant won't care when the earth warms and storms worsen in the layer we share with daisies and roses, robins and rabbits. When birds that visit in summer fly farther north each year and ever bigger waves lash the shore, the ant will walk unruffled in the viscous layer that skims the earth. March. Maybe age makes me reluctant to speed the guest who always overstays, but March reminds me I'm a lover of winter. You can have Palm Beach and pretty places old people go to warm themselves before they die. Give me this silent, stringent season, the only feet in the snow hours, or an unseen foxes, the only birds that brave the sky, hawk and crow. How could I have missed this, not noticed the rough games crows play with the wind, the way water curdles under ice in slowed motion? Why did I huddle by a hearth, oblivious to the mottled fire a low sun lights on red pine? Maybe I've learned to like austerity, or reached an age when all guests are parting, and I hate to speed them on. Near field. Because fog blurs the forest, we focus on the near field, the copper cuirass of leaves underfoot that shields the orange eft, another small fry, from snow's weight. Ferns green as go, their long fronds delicate, yet oddly sturdy in the cold. At the forest edge, we surprise a ruffed grouse and a couple kissing. She starts to apologize. Not used to seeing people around here, thought we had it all to ourselves. But we were glad we caught the couple kissing, the bird startled, thundering upwards, the near field fog revealed when it blurred the woods. Autonomy. We sit on a log in the forest to eat our sandwiches beside a rocky gorge where water scarcely moves, collecting in only a few small pools. In one, yellow leaves float on the surface in eddies that flow, one clockwise, one anti-clockwise. We watch the wayward leaves divide and take their separate paths, and you explain as a breath of wind floats leaves softly down on us why this must be, why two circles of current in a pool must counter one another or relinquish their autonomy. The Spiteful Rain. It was almost too pretty, I thought, that scarlet bird in a pink tree. Then the wind rose, whipping branches, and the cardinal left the flowering cherry. I was angry with the wind. There's no point, I know, in blaming it for what it does. Wind's nature is to disturb, and ours to compare whatever we see to us. That spiteful rain ruined the wedding. Why does the sun have to shine in my eyes? How mean of the deer to behead the tulips. And why is that cake so attractive to flies? It's so satisfying to blame the wind, to give the cloud a grumpy face. Step on the ant that crawls on your floor. Consider her part of the human race, an enemy to crush before she bites. The wind drops, the bird's back again on the cherry. We should be grateful for the lull, but here's a nasty spring shower to blame. This year was particularly difficult year for everybody, and although nature was beautiful, I think these poems that are set all in a different season of the year 2020 have a slight feeling that something is not quite right. Spring. It began with small things, furled umbrellas of skunk cabbage, a fattening of branches, faint daubs and brushstrokes of ochre and green, pale as watercolor, and tiny particles that floated like smoke through the chill air. Walking in the forest, we only half believed this promise could falter. Summer. Swimming in the lake near the black walnut, we listened to the kingfisher's rasping cry as he skimmed the water. An osprey passed overhead, bearing a fish like a bomb ready to drop. The water, no color, all colors, wrapping us in silk. The world now and forever surprising. Autumn. Trees blazed shameless on the hills, weedy sumac by the railway track lit up like fireworks. The forest floor coated many colors, a gaudy show before the dark descended, a last fling that ended our affair with fragile things that fall. Winter. Visitors, geese, herons are gone, and the wren that filled the garden with song, like the cottonwood framed in the bathroom window, its branches naked against the sky, we're exposed by this dark season, buffered by storms that bend, reliant on roots that hold us up, help us to withstand. And the last little poem that I'll read is called Hypothesis, familiar, probably subject to a lot of you. The squirrel, who worked out how to reach the bird feeder designed to frustrate him, was, I assure you, reader, faithful to the scientific method. Testing his hypothesis, he fell, reflected a moment, climbed to a higher branch parallel with the feeder, and leapt again. This time he managed to maraud the seed bought for birds. And what could I do but applaud? Thank you.
Thank you, Gail. Thank you. Next, I'm going to introduce Jack Hopper. And Jack, I'm going to take yourself off mute while I talk about you. Jack Hopper is a poet and editor. He has published 4 collections of poetry, most recently Rafting the Medusa. He moved to Ithaca in 2005 and is one of 3 founding editors of Cayuga Lake Books. He served as Poet Laureate for Tompkins County from 2015 to 2016. I just clicked a little thing that should come up on your screen that asks you to unmute. There you go.
Hello.
Hi.
Hello, everybody. Welcome. Good to see your faces. Some of course are current, but others like Paul Hamill. Hey, it's been a while. Good to see you up here. Katharyn mentioned Lynn Liftion when she was reading. Lynn Liftion was a poet whose works I encountered back in the late 60s and early 70s. She did things with the things she did, some were just really knocked me out. And I'm going to start reading by a poem that I modeled on something that she did with the plumber under the sink. Now, my poem doesn't go that far, but it has that spirit, I think. It's called Handyman. The poem leaks like a faucet, needs a new washer, maybe a plumber. It has been this way for months. I get by using another poem, putting up with the drip, drip. Early mornings are the worst. I think I know just what it needs, but by the time I get up, go to it, there's no time. Or the phone rings and it's you reminding me who caused the trouble in the first place. Back to the present. This poem is called Letting Go. He never had a treehouse, not a magic structure where a boy could sit and not be seen, become invisible, but to a chosen few. He spotted an older one, a rickety platform, all that was left of something someone else had built, likely his father or his father's brother. One that he could never make his own, hunker down in a hiddenness already claimed by someone else. Instead, he took the thick old rope suspended from a tree above the creek and gave himself to letting go. After many and better and farther swings out over the swollen waters that belonged to no one and to anyone, he dropped, then rose, regained the shore, the rope, swung out again and again to join the ever-changing flow. These poems grow older. This is called The Bunker. Kids duck below their parents' view. I dug a bunker once, couple feet deep, in a field down by the railroad, where I escaped my parents and went to be alone. It was no secret to my friends, Bad Patsy, Alice, or that other one, the loner son of someone's tribe that my own disliked, so he too came and went. Grown 10 feet tall, I tower now over the remnants of my hideaway. Some 70 years ago, new buildings shadow the field, mere vapor graves of generations gone below. Long hidden or dozed over, some secret hideaway, replenished by new hives of kids, come droning in and seeking selves, shares ways how not to be alone. we moved to high school. Time trial. You run the first quarter mile around the high school track, lay into the second quarter and the third. The only sound beside you gasping air, the pound of cinders spiked. The fourth quarter makes the mile. More warm-ups. You sculpt each step. Your pacing has improved. The start, the middle, coach says, noticing. By the third turn and hitting the final stretch, the kick's thrust pushes you past practices toward home. Competing, you pace yourself against a friend and secret rival, gradually catch up and pass him. And as if you never knew who that boy was. Later, it will gnaw. Maybe his only wish was to run, not win. Anyway, you hang up your shoes, hit the books, move on. Years later, coach's words remain. You run against time, not the others in the race. It is the journey, the power of the final kick, and not the tape you break that counts. The rival who remains your friend, the one you thought you beat, who passes, offering a notion of what is finally sweet. This petty race of just a mile is our short life that seemed so long till we broke the ribbon with a final burst and tried to suck back breath we took for granted all that time. The official watch was measuring how we ran the race before the finish and our last look back. On the town, out all night, survivors of our merry band wobbled into dawn, gently breaking on Park Avenue, found the Seagram building, its reflecting pool and fountain, and a strong desire to circle them. My young wife, along with the rest of us, removed her shoes and we began our circumnavigation, shining in spray. Our play was suddenly interrupted by a tall, mysterious lady, en route, we imagined, from some society ball or sauntering to a corner office. She views the scene, takes off her heels, and joins the start to finish. Stepping down, smile telling almost all, she adds, "I always wanted to do that. Thanks." And quietly ascends into her heaven. This is a poem that took place at our most recent store, Trader Joe's, about two weeks ago. It's called A Gift of Roses. Another rainy day. I bought some roses at the new Trader Joe's. For your wife? A store clerk asks. Unfortunately, no. And went on shopping till I got in line to pay. The same woman signaled me to a register she just opened. She noticed my old Trader Joe's shopping bag, a relic, I explained, from years ago in San Francisco. Once again, she complimented me on those dozen white roses. For the girlfriend of a friend, I offered, adding that the boyfriend would be at the dinner too. She lifted the flowers, scratched out the price, extended the bouquet. These roses are for you, and wished me a good day, which now it had become. And that's all, folks. Thank you very much.
That was lovely.
Thank you.
So next we have Melissa Tuckey.
Hello.
Oh, Melissa, do you have your video on? There you are. Did you spotlight yourself?
I don't know how to do that.
Spotlight for everyone. Good. sometimes these things take longer because the prompts kind of pop around the screen. You know, they're in one place at one time and another place. So it's like a little game that you play, the Zoom game. Next is Melissa Tuckey. She was the Poet Laureate from 2019 to 2020. Melissa is the author of Tenuous Chapel, a book of poems selected by Charles Simic for the ABZ Press First Book Prize, 2013, and editor of Ghost Fishing, an eco-justice poetry anthology. She's an emeritus fellow at Black Earth Institute and a co-founder of Split This Rock. She teaches poetry workshops from her home in Ithaca, New York.
Thank you. Thank you. It is wonderful to be here with all of you. And I hope we can do this again sometime in person.
We will.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to start with a forest poem inspired by Gail. It's reading. Finger Lakes Forest. See how lightning writes its love for thunder in strands of mycelium running beneath our feet. How the mind of this forest shivers through the trees, electrochemical nutrients that recognize the soles of our feet. Clumsy though we are, recognizable still by this forest. And this next one is Border Wall. Look, they will jail the man with a jug of water who travels by foot into the desert on a Saturday morning. Lock up children, take away their parents, separate them from their medicine, leave them to sleep on a concrete floor. Cruelty grows immense because we did not believe it could. Because it was a prison and not a school. Because it was a wall and not a table. Because the soccer fields had been cleared to make more space for jails. Because no one was responsible. Because everyone was responsible. Because the wall was higher than we ever imagined possible. Because the law could not be held accountable. Because language had become indefensible. Because no one could remember how to make it stop. And this next poem is brand new and in progress, so I'll break it out here. This is a duplex that's inspired by Jericho Brown and his lovely form, The Duplex, Mother Duplex. She shoulders, muscles through a twin engine so loud I lose a register. Lost register, the engine so loud, muscled in, it's hard to know how to love her. I muscle in to love, breaking things. Mother of fury, for whom the sky is rage. For whom the sky rages. Tonight, my mother scours the kitchen until her knuckles bleed. Scours the kitchen until her knuckles bleed, scalding tomatoes on a summer day. Summer days scald the tomatoes, pressure cooker jiggles, a viper in the kitchen. A viper under pressure, my mother, the kitchen. She muscles through. And this is a poem for the TSA officers who rifled our bags to dump homemade jam we were carrying as gifts. And this is a true story. You never can tell what those peaches were doing together, naked together in that Guatemalan basket. or how the moon whispered to an underground of resurgent garlic, winters when you thought the living world asleep. Beware the last red peppers of autumn, how they fatten into gorgeous fists raised in dawn and solidarity. Trust not the pickled relish. Keep an eye on those candied beets. Know that the bees are amassing in goldenrod, hoping to keep their queen alive, as battalions of crickets play violin in the tall, anonymous grass. Trust not the sweat-sticky kitchen, uprising of steam as grapes roil, a delirium of kettle shaking goodness. Keep an eye on that elder who ladles the whole sweet mess into a bell choir of singing jars, each ping rousing unexplainable delight. Know that in kitchens throughout this land, such sweetness is gathering daily. And I'll just close. I think I lost track of time with one last poem. Poetry is this I wrote while I was poet laureating, and it is such an honor to serve as poet laureate and such a pleasure to be called into the world and to have people call and say, we need a poet, and there you are. So this was just a reflection on the places poetry takes us. Poetry is praise the path that poetry makes from the prison cell to the legislative chamber, from the choir mouthing an ancient hymn to the bookstore with clumsy chairs. Praise children, praise all that is taken up by osmosis in those shiny, still unbroken leaves. Praise the wind nodding and spitting with mouth and tongue, guttural howls tried on thin air. Elders who priest us, young people who witch us. Praise whoever is standing alone on a stage stammering, or holding in a holding cell asking for a book. The way we lumbering animals take heart and heart and heart again in what moves us to the edge of ourselves. Halo of light rounding the corner, reader awake under one bulb still burning. Strange countries we would have feared had we not heard the singing. Thank you.
Good.
There we go. Thank you very much. Our next poet laureate is our current poet laureate. I'm starting my video so you can see my face. Christine Kitano. Hi, Christine. Lives in Brooktondale and is an assistant professor at Ithaca College, where she teaches poetry and Asian American literature. She also serves on the faculty for the MFA program for writers at Warren Wilson College. She is the author of 2 collections of poetry, Birds of Paradise, Lynx House Press, and Sky Country, BOA Editions, which won the Central New York Book Award. Thank you, Christine.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me. I am the current poet laureate, so I wanted to take the beginning of my reading actually to invite everyone to the launch of the monthly Poem and Prompt Social Club. So this is my project as poet laureate. We'll be meeting once a month for an hour to read a poem from Best American Poetry 2020. We had anthologies that were generously donated by David Leeming. And we'll read a poem, talk through its strategies, and then work on a prompt for a poem. So this is supposed to be fun. It's supposed to be a social activity, and everyone is welcome to join. The launch is this Sunday at 3:00 p.m. Information, of course, on Spring Rights. I'm also going to put the link to the Google sign up in the chat. So if you can't come, but you just want to get on the information list, you can sign up for that there. All right, I'm going to read 3 poems today. And I will say that these are 3 very new poems. They are poems that are in process. So just keep that in mind. This first poem is called Spaces Between. In a pub upstate in February, in the marrow of winter, a bone-white glacial wall outside the stained glass window, the bartender pours your first taste of whiskey, inch of amber light suspended in time. How it burns your throat, but then the glow. Like a lantern lit from within, for a moment, a perceptible space opens, a bench to sit on, undusted of snow, a warmed light cutting through, and the low blare of a trombone, B-flat, unwavering, the player breathing life through the machine. The note shimmers like glass, and you are underwater, holding your breath, counting your pulse, waiting for the sound to fade. Then you're back, the scene unchanged, the penny-colored ceiling tiles still hammered with their Celtic knot procession, the winter sunlight splashed into a dim rainbow above the bar-back mirror, stout tulip glasses hung upside down like stilled bells. Back to the strangers huddled in bulking coats, freckles of snow slow dissolving on wet wool. Back to the space after the space, the ever now, the ever present, the ever just missed, the space before you drop the glass tumbler, time and light slipping your opened fist. The next poem I'll read is based on living where I live in Brooktondale, which is just outside of Ithaca. It is currently titled Route 79. And if anyone knows Route 79 really well, they'll know that not everything that I mentioned in this poem is actually on Route 79. Some of the things are just on the side streets, but this is my poetic license here. Route 79. The more traveled road, less likely to be slicked with the invisible sheen of black ice. The cashier at the dandy gas station offers this guidance. Follow in the grooved tracks already stamped in the snow. The guy behind me in line, holding a steaming styrofoam cup and a bag of beef jerky, says otherwise. Better to make new tracks. And they're both right. I'm not from around here. I guide my car, the Unruly Whale, wheezing and sputtering down Route 79, where, like a dancer in a dimmed, smoky nightclub, it slow sways its heavy tail, left, right, left, dragging its rusted undersides like a bejeweled veil and demanding all attention. A snowplow barrels forth from the opposite direction, blessing us as it passes with a baptism of salt and fresh churned frost. I hold my gloved hands steady, still cold with winter ache, brace for the catch of traction beneath the tires before pressing forward, past the gutted barn reduced mostly to slats, its hollowed inside slowly filling with snow, past the other gas station with its neon sign advertising hot pizza, hot coffee, past the bronze plaque that marks First Caroline Town Meeting, then another that reads Slave Burying Ground. There's the bar on the first floor of a house that also sells fresh eggs. The row of bungalows flying a limp Confederate flag, white lawn after white lawn of Trump signs. In town, the used bookstore and coffee houses boast rainbow stickers, Black Lives Matter, and all are welcome signs, which, depending on the weather, can feel either welcoming or smug. My second night living here, after a welcome dinner at a vegan farm-to-table bistro in town, barbecue tofu and cauliflower, so much pale food. The headlights gave out, and I drove the 8 miles to my new house in what felt like complete darkness. No street lamps, no house lights, no other cars, alone as a loosed satellite floating, untethered in space. Now, tires firmly sunk in existing tracks, the wind slaps another pancake of snow to the windshield, and I can make out only endless, undifferentiated white. But even snow-blinded, I know where I am, that my turn approaches. I know to take the turn slow, signal even if there's no other soul in sight, and to keep looking ahead, so even when the car begins to heave left instead of right, and my stomach dips when I feel the road slip out from under, I can hold my panic. I keep steering, keep my head up to look, not where I'm going, but instead ahead, to where it is I want to go. And the last poem I'll read is about something that happened when I was younger, and it was a moment that that I still think about to this day. And it's called Growing Up. Recall the sun breaking against the grain of the concrete steps, the heat radiating its particulate light. Then hear the wind moving like liquid through tall stalks of bamboo, clustered. Remember this layer of sight and sound, then the smell, motor oil, paint drying in aluminum cans, the heady tang of turpentine and tar. And when you go back, can you go back without forecasting, without already knowing how this story ends? Early summer, you're 9. You want to spray paint your pink bicycle blue, so cash in your coins at the hardware store, spread newspaper on the driveway, using bits of broken brick to secure the corners. There's the satisfying knock in the paint can when you shake it. Now remember how in the moment of pressing the nozzle, you know you've forgotten to account for something, for some vital and important thing, but already the color floods out. Then that slow motion, dreamlike sequence when you look up to see the paint particles coalescing into an aquamarine veil, floating on the wind like a slow swarm of bees in the wrong direction, not toward the bike, but instead toward your father's new car, black, immaculate, and glittering like obsidian in the carport. And recall how 2 options unfold before you. 1, to say nothing, to swallow this mistake and hold the secret like a sickness. Or 2, the only real option, to get on the bike, too small, too pink, a relic of another era, another father and daughter collapsed now by time and circumstance, and to ride, no goodbye, no known destination, just the gravel driveway that gives way to dirt as you pedal, all the decisions you will make or fail to make unfurling like a map in front of the bike's wobbly wheel, choice after choice, your hair a hard black line behind you, unable to look back, too sure that this is how it must be, this unplanned launch into the future, the trees unthickening as you tunnel ahead, catching the articulation of each leaf only as it passes out of the corner of your eye, then blurring. Thank you.
Thank you, Christine. Thank you very much. So we now come to the end of Saturday, May 13th, Thursday, May 13th, Spring Rights Literary Festival. I encourage you to tune in for Friday, Saturday, and Sunday events. And if you can, we encourage you to donate to the Community Arts Partnership of Tompkins County and the Spring Rights Literary Festival. And I put the link in the chat. If anyone would like to stay and ask questions, maybe to the artists to the writers or to the Community Arts Partnership, we'll hang out for a while. You can consider this the after party. And you could take yourself off mute.